I don't really know how to start a video like this, and I don't really know where it's going to go, but I just wanted to kind of get some stuff out there and just talk about some things, because obviously you'll have seen the title, you'll have heard the news by now, that Ozzy Osbourne has passed away at the age of 76, and even that's the first time I've said it out loud. How do you sum up, you know, if it feels like a family member, and I think a lot of people around the world will have a similar sentiment to that it feels like losing a family member, whether that be, he was always this figure of like a fun uncle or a granddad to everybody. Yeah, I'm still processing it, and so apologies if this kind of goes on a little bit of a tangent and doesn't really seem well thought out, because it's not thought out at all. It's just kind of, 17 days ago we were at Villa Park watching him play, and we knew that was going to be his last ever show. That was kind of what made it special, and that day was so magical already. 17 days later, it just doesn't feel real, and I don't think it'll feel real for a while. There aren't many celebrity deaths that kind of hit everybody in the way that this seems to have done. I would say the last musician that I had this reaction to was Chester Bennington. Before that, probably Lemmy. How can you put into context everything that, over the next few days and weeks, you'll hear news articles and you'll hear testimonies and things saying what he was. He was the frontman of Black Sabbath, one of the godfathers of heavy metal. He had his own solo career. He had the Osbournes. He had this. He had that. He was a staple of pop culture. But he was also just a kind, good person, and you could see that in everything. And he had his issues. He had his health issues, and he had his issues with drink and substance abuse and addiction and stuff. But he always, it was always about the fans. It was always about giving back to people. And you see videos of him talking to kids and just being so making time for everybody, making everybody else feel like they were equals. And there aren't really the way. I apologize that this is kind of just a bit of a silent video, but we could 17 days ago we got to sing along with him for those 9 songs. By the way, like, when that show was announced, people were saying, oh, he might not be able to perform a full set, which obviously we were never expecting him to. And then, some people were saying, well, he might only be able to do 1 or 2. That was fine by me. That would have been, if it had come out that he was in no position to perform and he was just going to sit there, that would have been fine by me. Just being there and being surrounded by his best friends, his family, his fans in his home, not just his home city, but in Villa Park is literally a 10-minute walk from where he was raised, and so that is literally like a hometown thing. And for him to have experienced that, you know, for him to have got that for himself, and for that event to have raised, at the current standing, £140 million for charity. That's for Cure Parkinson's, the Acorn Children's Charity, and Birmingham Children's Hospital. As it stands, that's £140 million, which is £45 million each. What better way to be remembered than that, for that to be your final act, almost, or final, you know, public act. But 17 days ago, we got to say goodbye to him in person. And he played 9 songs, which is, I think, a lot more than anybody really expected him to be able to do. But he did it because he cared about the fans, and he did it because he wanted that last celebration. And I don't think he'd want anybody to get... He'd want people to remember the good aspects of his life, and to celebrate not just his legacy, but his best friends, Tony Geezer and Bill, all the countless musicians that he's played with outside of Black Sabbath, all the musicians that were inspired by him. He'd want a celebration. He wouldn't want you know. But to have been there in that stadium 17 days ago, I mean, we're still recovering from the actual show. We're still talking about it, and you know, I feel like the conversation is still in the middle of winding down about that show. And to say that we got to sing his last performance with him is one of the great honours of my life so far. This is a man who inspired the people who inspired me, who inspired me himself, and who inspired millions of other people around the world to just... He was unapologetically himself, always, even when it didn't, you know, even when people didn't like it, even when it made him seem a bit strange or weird, or, you know, he was always unapologetically himself. And that kind of mentality is what heavy metal kind of, you know, Black Sabbath were the sound of heavy metal. Ozzy Osbourne was the face of heavy metal. He was the voice of heavy metal. And he was the persona of heavy metal as well. And I don't think there are many people in history, not just musical history, but in history, who have had the cultural impact that he has had. 57 years after those 4 guys from Birmingham decided to play a gig together in the Crown Pub in Birmingham, 57 years later, after all of the highs and the lows and twists and turns along the way, now we say goodbye. And there's that song he's got with Elton John that says, I don't want to die an ordinary man. He was the furthest thing from an ordinary man that there is. And again, I apologise if this video is just, it's just a lot of silence in between. I apologise. But to Sharon and Jack and Kelly and the rest of his extended family, to all of his friends, to his bandmates and everybody else that he's played with over the years, and to every single person in the world out there who calls themselves a fan of heavy metal, I don't know if I'll cut this bit out, I don't know, but he gave us so much that we then in turn every single day now give to each other as well. He started the heavy metal community, the heavy metal family, and as bands were saying all throughout the day on that Back to the Beginning event, we wouldn't be here without, you know, without Black Sabbath, without Ozzy Osbourne. So then there's no Metallica. Without Metallica, there's no wave of other bands. You know, without Black Sabbath, there is probably no Iron Maiden, at least not in the same way. And I think what the Back to the Beginning show proved to me, at least, is that it is so much more than just one person, and he would be the first to say that as well, that the heavy metal family now needs to come together, as we have done before, and as we undoubtedly will do it again in the future. And if you are part of that family, I just want to say that you're not alone. It's okay to be upset, it's okay to grieve, it's okay to feel whatever you need to feel. And rest in peace, Jonathan Michael Osbourne.